Hey everyone, hope you're doing good. Okay, so if you've watched any of the recently uploaded videos, you know that I'm tripping over words a lot lately. No. You'll know that I'm in the last rush to be ready for fall, and that means clearing out my garden. And I'm kind of excited about this, not just because it's nice to see what's growing in the garden, because the past couple of videos, there are definitely a few here that you might have not only growing in your garden or definitely be able to grow easily on your own, but some, like this culinary sage, you can go buy from the store. So even if you live somewhere where you're surrounded by concrete, you don't have a garden, odds are good you can go to your local grocery store and go to like almost like the salad section, to the fresh herb section. You can probably find yourself some organic culinary sage. And you're like, why would I want to do that? Well, sage, although she does taste good with particular like poultry and stuff like that, she's got a lot of amazing medicinal properties. And one of those things is helping with a sore throat. Definitely a theme coming up with all these honey infusions I'm showing you how to make. But sage in particular is fantastic for sore throats. Strep throat, she's fantastic for. She's a pretty powerful antibacterial, anti-staph, that kind of stuff. But also she's got really neat properties of, like, she dries us out. So if like your nose is like really runny and you've just got just wetness everywhere, you know, you're really damp feeling, she can help with that. She's also pretty great at breaking fevers. If you need to dry up your breast milk, sage is the lady for you. If you're bleeding too heavy during your moon time, sage is the lady for you. She's just all around an astringent, meaning to dry up. And so we're gonna make a sage infused honey because I'm not gonna lie, sage when it's cooked on its like own, like just simmered in water and drink like a tea, she does not taste very great. And you're thinking, those little packets from the store sure don't come with very much in them, and that's okay because she is such a volatile lady, meaning she has really high volatile oil levels that you don't really need a lot to get the job done. So while you watch me make half gallons of honey at a time, you could definitely make a pint, a quart, you know, a half a pint, and you could probably fill up a half pint or a pint with 2 or 3 of those sage packs from the store, and it would be just enough. So basically I've harvested the last of my sage this year that I'm comfortable taking off of her, because if you are growing a large lady sage in your garden, don't cut back too much because it'll shock her and she won't be able to like focus on like restoring her roots and then coming back next year happy and healthy. So this is all the sage I have to do a half gallon of honey, and you're like, that is not enough, but again, it definitely is. And then I see some people, I won't call it a mistake, but I mean, I see some people choose to put like a ton of sage, like maybe they would fill up like this entire quart jar with sage and then put the honey over top of that, and you're just probably gonna go ugh, because it's gonna be so potent. And like, while sometimes we do really need strong medicine like that, like we don't have to punish ourselves like to feel better, you know, and that's why sage and honey play so nice together. So I've got this jar that's already got some honey in it, and I'm just gonna use her because there's nothing wrong with it, versus dirtying up another jar. So I'm just gonna take my sage, and now because I don't use a whole lot, I do choose to use the stems, but that's okay, they have medicinal properties, and I'm just gonna cut her up like this into the jar. Now, usually when you see me showing you how to make tinctures, I tell you to, you know, fill it up all the way to the top, don't leave any air in here. The honey kind of prevents oxidation. There we go. And oxidation is when, like, you take a bite of an apple or you peel a banana and it turns brown. It's been exposed to oxygen and it starts to lose some of its like medicinal and mineral properties, and it's exposed to air. You don't really have to worry about that because honey makes a good coating. Now if you're not filling your jar all the way up with honey, it's important that every day you turn your jar. I probably should have given that tip in other videos. That way That way you are recoating any plant material that does float to the top, because it always loves to float to the top. What I usually do is just flip it over once a day. I make sure my jar is on real tight, and then I just, you know, I walk by and I flip it, you know, and maybe in the evening I turn it back over, but just once a day, and then I flip it the other way, and then it's just constantly moving, and it gets it to infuse really well. So again, you don't need a whole lot. And so you can see the small amount that I'm using to make a half gallon's worth of honey. And you probably don't need a half gallon's worth of honey unless you just like really love sage, because you could certainly use this to cook if you wanted to. So sometimes when I'm talking about making honeys, I talk to you about how it's going to ferment. I've not really found much fermentation occurs with sage, because sage, no matter what variety she is by nature a dry plant. So she's not going to give you so much fermentation here that you really need to follow the process. But if you find that you walk by and you push the top of your lid and it doesn't make that poppy sound, and you can't push down on it, then you need to open your lid to let some of the fermentation gases off. But I doubt that will happen to you with your sage, especially because we're not putting a ton in here, meaning there's not enough moisture here to make the honey above 25% water content. And above 25% water content is when honey starts to ferment. But if she does ferment, no big deal. That's pretty easy to handle. After you strain off your plant matter out of her in about, you know, 3 to 6 weeks. You can put the honey into a double boiler, or put your jar into water, making sure that it's pretty much covered with the water, not up to the rim, but pretty much covered, and then bring your honey up to 170, 200 degrees temp or so, and that will kill off the yeast that's creating the fermentation. Or you can just pop it in the fridge, because cold will halt fermentation for the most part. But I'd really be pretty surprised if you got your sage to ferment, honestly, because she's so dry. Like you couldn't suck moisture out of this thing to save your life. Like, there's moisture there, you know. She's not like a dry stick, and she's definitely fresh, and we want to be using fresh. But sage, just by nature, is very dry. And very fragrant too. I don't know why I smelled my fingers, because the whole room smells like her. But I am just cutting her up to give a little bit more surface area, so she has a little bit more potent ability to be extracted. Like the honey can pull more out of her. This is just really handy to have on hand. You know, if you make these medicines before you get sick, you will be grateful that you did, because it sucks. Like, your throat's all swollen and you can't talk and it hurts to swallow. That's not the time to be making medicines. That's the time to be reaching for ready-made, safe, simple plant allies. You know, and this is such an easy one. She's even good at, I think I mentioned it, but she's good at knocking fevers back too, and she does that by getting us to sweat. So do make sure that you're drinking plenty of water as well, because, you know, she's an astringent, so she might make you pee a little too. Well, that's a diuretic, but still, she does have some diuretic properties. But when you sweat, you're losing water, so you get the point. So, again, it's just as easy as going to the store or out to your garden or a friend's garden, somebody who's growing culinary sage. I don't want you to go out and pick like big sage or wild sage. Please don't pick white sage or anything like that. What I'm talking on here in particular is culinary sage. Not that these other sages don't have medicinal properties and that some of them can't work in the same way, but the sage family is so big. Some of them are pretty toxic. So I'm talking on one specific variety of sage. And you shouldn't use white sage in general, because that's just unethical. She's endangered from in the wild from the spirituality movement over harvesting her, because everybody thinks that, you know, we should use her to smudge, and just I won't touch on it anymore, but just don't use white sage. But yeah, culinary sage, she's fantastic. She's been in use for a millennia. If you are of European descent, she's of your ancestors' descent. You know, this is the sage that mainly grows in European cultures. Not to say that there aren't more like desert sages in like Eastern European and areas like that. But culinary sage has been used for a very, very long time. So, I mean, it's so easy. It really is. I should probably just get to work and stop talking. But I think you might be here because you like listening to me talk, so that's conflicting. But I'm almost done. I'm almost done. And again, it doesn't look like much, but I promise after you let this sit somewhere warm, she will be definitely pretty potent. And then you can just take a spoonful, put it in some water, you know, pour warm water over top of it, and you'll have yourself an instant cup of tea. If you've got a real bad sore throat, I wouldn't even hesitate to just slowly swallow a spoonful. I've even done this cool thing where I take this sage honey, and then I form it into slippery elm balls, which slippery elm is a whole different herb, but you can order that powdered online, and that is amazing for sore throats. You take the honey and you basically make like a dough, and I'm just going to have to make a video showing you how to do that. Because then you can like suck on this thing and it puts like a protective coating on your throat that also like kills the pain and helps you heal and knock down that inflammation and kill the bacteria. And it's really just as easy as mixing some slippery elm with some infused sage honey. So, alright. The next step is pretty self-explanatory. I'm guessing you can guess what I'm going to do. I'm going to get all these little bits up here. I rescued my sage plants this summer, actually. Somebody was just going to get rid of them. They were just going to pull them out because they weren't doing very well. I'm like, you weren't paying attention to them. And so they flourished pretty well. This is probably about, I don't know, 6th or 7th harvest of this size I've been able to get off them. They're nice and healthy. So I'm glad that I saved her because I am grateful. Now, even if you're watching this in the dead of winter, the really cool thing about culinary sage is people love to cook with her. So again, she's always available in the store. And if you want to make a big amount, if you hop online, odds are good you can find somewhere that will ship you fresh culinary sage in large amounts. This is how restaurants get it. They're not going down to Wally World and buying the tiny little herb packs one at a time. They're getting it sent to them bulk. You can also do that with like rosemary and thyme, a few other herbs like that. I actually made a rosemary video if you haven't seen that one. Well, that was for a tincture, but still. So now I'm just going to cover her with honey. Honey. Oh, goodness. And I'm using raw honey. I like to use raw honey because she's got, you know, still, she's not pure sugar. She is sugar, but her body processes her a little bit better. She's got her own unique antibacterial and healing qualities. But if you can't get raw honey, because, you know, not everybody can access that, plain honey will work too. But in that instance, it is a spoonful of sugar to make your medicine go down. But you could. What's funny is if you do use, come on, word. Pasteurized honey, there it is. If you do use pasteurized honey and you use an herb that can cause fermentation, the funny thing is that fermentation process will put back beneficial bacteria into your honey, so the honey won't just be pure sugar anymore because the yeast will actually eat up the sugar because that's what they're thriving on. So, you know, there's a silver lining if you look hard enough for it in places. So, you know, you can see I'm not making a full half gallon, and that's fine because I'm going to use this mainly to make those slippery elm balls I was talking about. But it's so easy that you can do this, okay? That's what I make all these videos for. Yeah, to get this information out there, but I'm so sick and tired of people telling you, of the current herbalist world, making you feel like you aren't smart enough to do this unless you pay them thousands of dollars to teach you. Do you really think you need to pay somebody to cut up some sage and dump some honey over it? I think that you can do this. And if you stick to these relatively safe, simple, like food type plants, you're going to be really hard pressed to hurt yourself. I mean, like, you'd really have to make an effort to injure yourself with these plants. So get out here and do this. Go to the store, buy some sage, buy some honey, make yourself a little jar, make yourself a big jar, experiment. You could buy yourself a big thing of honey and a bunch of little jars and different fresh herbs, and you can see how you like them. You can see how your body reacts to them, and you won't be out a whole lot of money. So anyhow, got most of that honey in there, and you can see where I've got my handy dandy stirrer here, which is just an icing spreader thingy. That's a technical word, thingy. And I'm just gonna knock some of that sage down in there. Probably, I'll get most of it when I flip it every day, you know. That is one thing, if you fill the jar up all the way, you don't have to worry about stuff being stuck on the sides. But I'm just gonna make sure she's mixed down in there. Okay. Not making too much of a mess. Scrape the honey off of there. Alright. Now, I'm just going to put my lid on it. And then I'm going to put a label on her, that way I know who I'm working with. Because if you start making a bunch of these jars, I don't care how good your memory is, you will forget who is who eventually. I mean, even I've been working with plants my entire life. I've got literally hundreds of jars, and while I could like taste and test and smell and evaluate, especially since I don't chop up my plants into oblivion, I can look at them. It is just easier for me mentally to look at a label, and then you don't make mistakes trying to be like, oh, that's who that is. Oh my gosh, that wasn't who that is. So just make a label. Mine have on them whether it's a tincture, a honey, if it's a mix, if it's store-bought, if it's wildcrafted, where I got it from, what's in it, weights, ounces, when I decanted it, so on and so forth. You do not have to make that complicated of a label. You can just use a piece of masking tape, a piece of duct tape. You can go buy blank labels. You can write it on a piece of paper and tape it on there. I don't care what you do. I just want you to label it. So I'm going to put on here garden sage and honey. I'm going to put the date. I marked it as honey, and I got it from my garden. Now, I probably won't let this go past 6 weeks. Sometimes I might even, like, I'll taste a little bit of it, and if I'm like, that's strong enough, I won't even go past 5 weeks. That way it's not too potent for me, but if you want it stronger, you can let it go stronger. I'd, again, probably not let it go past 8 weeks very much, because eventually the herbs in it can go bad. Some people have been worried about botulism in honey, so I want to touch on that for a second. Botulism can't survive in high sugar environments. So like, you will never have a botulism risk in this honey because she's too sugary, which is why if you're making like jams or jellies, you know, anything really sugary, you don't have to use a pressure cooker, you use a water bath, because she has so much sugar that that bacteria can't thrive in her. So the same thing applies to here. So now I've got my label on her, and I'm going to sit her somewhere between 4 to 8 weeks, somewhere warm and dark. I like to use a seed heating mat. They're fantastic. They're cheap online. But you can also use like the top of your fridge. You can use the top of your water heater. Any surface that's warm to the touch but not like crazy hot is going to help these herbs and honey infuse better together. So that's how I'm making a sage honey. I'll probably use her to make slippery elm balls, but you could just take a spoon out, eat it. You could take a spoon, put it in some water, make some tea. You can even cook with it if you like the flavor of sage. And that's the really cool thing about a lot of these culinary herbs that people don't realize is, yeah, they taste good, but they're also a medicine. So get curious about the spices you have in your cupboard and the things you buy fresh, and be like, I can make a really good tasting soup with this, but I wonder like how I could like help my body by making I would call it an intentional medicine. I mean, we should cook with things that heal us too, but like if we're like, this is definitely more intentional than if I put a little bit of sage on top of some trout or something, you know. This is going to have more of a reaction in my body than just flavoring. So if you like my videos, if you like just learning about all these really simple things to do, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications by clicking the little bell icon below. And then come find me. Come find me on Instagram. Come find me on my website. And you can check out those things by following the link in my bio. And then that last but definitely not least, make sure to like and comment on these videos. It lets me know that I'm not alone. It helps me answer questions you might have, or answer other people. If you ask a question of something I didn't cover and I answer it, you probably answer like 100 other people's questions too by asking your own. So don't ever be afraid to ask questions related to the videos. And then, you know, the whole interacting with me on Instagram. And plus, totally lost it there. Yeah, come do all the things, click all the buttons, okay? So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time, okay? Bye.